Welcome to Thought Frontier.
We're talking tech and society, yeah.
Yeah,
Two sides of the same coin.
definitely.
How technology shapes us, our lives, economies, our values,
Absolutely.
even and how we can kind of steer its course.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. It's really fascinating
Yeah.
how we often think about technology as just the latest gadget,
right.
but it's so much bigger than that.
Yeah.
One of the papers uses this term socio-technical landscapes.
Okay.
And I love that phrase because it gets at this idea that
Yeah.
it's not just about a single device or a single piece of tech.
Right.
It's about these interconnected systems that emerge around it.
Okay, I love that phrase, socio-technical landscapes.
Yeah.
So it's like, instead of just looking at my phone, right, I need to think about the apps, the internet infrastructure,
Yes.
the companies behind them, even like the social norms around how we use them.
Precisely. Think
Yeah.
about something like the automobile.
Okay.
Right? That wasn't just like, oh, here's a faster horse.
Right.
It transformed transportation, sure.
Yeah.
But it also revolutionized urban planning, right? Like we created suburbs,
Totally.
shaped our leisure time.
Yeah.
And that's a socio-technical landscape in action.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I'm already seeing things differently.
Yeah.
How about something like the internet? I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
that feels like a huge socio-technical landscape.
It's massive. It's reshaped communication, commerce,
Right.
how we consume information, how we form opinions.
Totally.
It's a powerful example of how technology sort of creates these systems with these far-reaching consequences.
And those consequences aren't always positive, right?
Right. And that's,
This paper about Robert Moses's bridges
yes.
in Long Island was a real eye-opener for me.
Yeah, that's a stark example of how technology can be used to reinforce existing social structures,
Yeah.
sometimes in ways that disadvantage certain groups.
Right.
Designing those bridges with low overpasses effectively limited access for buses,
Wow.
which impacted lower income communities for generations.
It's crazy how these design choices, even seemingly just like technical ones,
Right.
can have these huge social impacts.
Yeah, and oftentimes they're unintended,
Yeah.
but they're still very real.
Absolutely. What are some other modern-day examples that we should be paying attention to?
Well, I think a big one that's getting a lot of attention is algorithms,
Oh,
right? I mean, they're everywhere.
they are everywhere.
From deciding what you see on social media to influencing loan approvals, even criminal sentencing.
Wow.
So we have to be very, very mindful of how these systems are designed and the data they're trained on.
So it's not enough to just marvel at the latest algorithm or AI breakthrough.
Right.
We need to be asking those tough questions about who benefits,
Yes.
who it might be harming, the
Absolutely.
kind of world we are creating with it.
Yeah, and that's why I think understanding these socio-technical landscapes is so crucial.
Totally.
Because it helps us see beyond the shiny surface of new technology and really grapple with these complex, often messy ways that it interacts with society.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've seen how tech doesn't exist in a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
It's part of this whole web we call society.
Yeah.
But how does that actually play out, like, in the real world? Is technological progress just this straight line from A to B?
That's where it gets really interesting. The research you shared, it kind of challenges this linear view of progress.
Okay.
It talks about these things called regimes,
Okay.
which are these dominant sets of rules, practices, even institutions that govern a particular technology.
So instead of a straight line, it's more like technology's following a set path,
Yeah.
like a train on tracks.
Exactly.
Okay.
And these tracks, these regimes, they can exert a really powerful force, even create a kind of inertia, making it hard to shift to new technologies, even when they seem better on paper.
Hold on. So you're saying that even if something's cheaper, more efficient, maybe better for the environment,
Yeah.
it might not take off just because of this regime holding it back.
You got it. And a great example from the research is actually the adoption of electric vehicles.
Okay.
So even though the lifetime costs can be comparable to gas-powered cars,
Right.
the shift hasn't exactly been smooth sailing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a massive infrastructure built around gas-powered cars, right?
Virtually.
Like we've got gas stations everywhere, mechanics who know how to fix them.
Yeah.
It's not just about the car itself, it's the whole system.
Exactly. You've got manufacturing plants, you've got oil refineries, you even have cultural associations, right? Like gas guzzlers, freedom, the open road.
Totally.
All of that creates a really powerful lock-in effect.
So if these regimes are so powerful, How does anything new ever break through?
Right.
It's like a chicken and egg thing.
Well, that's where niches come in.
Okay.
These smaller, kind of protected spaces where new technologies can develop, gain traction,
Okay.
without having to go head-to-head with that dominant regime right away.
So it's like a testing ground, a safe haven
Exactly.
for this new tech to find its footing.
Think about the early days of the internet, right? Dial-up was slow,
Oh, yeah.
but it was all we had.
Right.
The infrastructure for broadband didn't exist, even if the technology was promising.
Right.
It needed that niche to grow.
And I'm guessing universities, research labs, that was like the early niche for the internet, where it could develop without having to be commercially viable right out of the gate.
Precisely. And as the technology matured in that niche,
Yeah.
it paved the way for broader adoption, right?
That's the way.
The internet got faster, more user-friendly,
Right.
and then eventually it became indispensable.
Right.
You can't live without it.
Totally. So niches are crucial for those early stages.
Yeah.
But what about scaling up? How do we go from niche to something that can actually challenge
Right.
and maybe even replace a dominant regime?
That's the million-dollar question,
Yeah.
and that's what we'll unpack next.
Yeah.
Can we consciously steer technological development towards a future we want,
Hmm.
or are we just along for the ride?
So we've talked about how new technologies can emerge,
Yeah.
like finding those niches within those larger regimes.
Yeah.
But can we actually steer technological development? Can we consciously choose a direction?
That's the million-dollar question,
Right.
especially when we're talking about something as complex as like building a more sustainable future.
Right.
And the research you shared actually offers some really interesting perspectives on this.
Okay.
It suggests that simply picking winners,
Okay.
governments deciding which technology is going to succeed and throwing all their weight behind it,
Yeah.
that it's not that simple.
So it's not as easy as saying, okay, electric cars, that's the future. Everybody switch over.
If only it were that easy, right?
Right.
I mean, we're talking about these complex socio-technical landscapes.
Yeah.
Remember, there are these regimes in place, there are niches to leverage,
Yeah.
there are all sorts of social and economic barriers to consider.
So what's the alternative?
Yeah.
Is there a more effective role for governments to play?
Well, the research points to this idea of governments acting more as facilitators of change
Okay.
rather than just regulators.
Okay.
It's about creating the conditions where sustainable technologies can flourish.
Give me examples.
Sure. One of the papers actually discusses this initiative in Los Angeles
Okay.
to promote electric vehicle adoption.
Okay.
And it's a really interesting case study in how policies can actually help to create those niches and stimulate demand.
What did they do specifically? Because, I mean, we're talking about LA. It's a very car-heavy city.
Oh, absolutely.
So how did they even make a dent?
Well, they implemented a number of policies, one of which was requiring
Okay.
car manufacturers to produce a certain percentage of zero-emission vehicles,
Hmm.
which in effect created this sort of guaranteed market for EVs.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right, and encouraged car companies to actually invest in the technology.
So instead of forcing people to switch over, it was more like creating this economic pull.
Exactly.
Okay.
But they didn't just stop there.
Okay.
They also invested heavily in charging infrastructure,
Oh, right.
made it easier for people to install home chargers,
Okay.
offered incentives for consumers to make the switch.
Wow.
So it was really about shaping that entire socio-technical landscape.
That makes a lot of sense. And it
Yeah.
feels much more, I don't know, realistic
Yeah.
than just saying, this is the winner and we're just going to hope for the best.
Right.
But I imagine there are still challenges.
Oh, of course. I mean, this type of strategic niche management requires a really deep understanding of both the technological and social factors that are at play.
Right.
Governments need to be able to anticipate potential roadblocks,
Right.
coordinate across different sectors,
Yeah.
adapt their policies as the technology evolves.
Right.
It's a very dynamic process.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act,
It is.
but also maybe the only way to move beyond these incremental changes within
Yeah.
the existing and oftentimes unsustainable regimes that we have.
That's a great point. And it really underscores the key takeaway, I think, from this whole deep dive,
Okay.
which is that if we want to steer towards a more sustainable future,
Yeah.
we need to be proactive, we need to be strategic,
Right.
and understand that it's not just about technological innovation in a vacuum.
Right.
It's about transforming entire systems, which requires understanding this complex dance between technology and the society
Totally.
that it both shapes and is shaped by.
That's a really powerful thought to end on and a call to action, I think, for all of us
Absolutely.
to really think critically about these technologies and the future that we're building.
It's about asking ourselves, are we shaping technology or is it shaping us?
Such a good question. Thank you so much for diving into all of this with me.
It's been my pleasure.
And for all of you listening, keep those wheels turning, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.